Arsenal are out of the Champions League. PSG beat them 2-1 at the Parc des Princes, 3-1 on aggregate. Arsenal did have a lot of chances, particularly in the first 10 minutes of that match. You were a little bit disappointed with how the game went in the end.
Yeah, hugely disappointed, because I really felt that Arsenal could go there and make a good go of it. It was never a given that Arsenal were going to get through. I don't think anybody of an Arsenal persuasion was overly confident, but you felt that given that Arsenal managed to rectify the issues they encountered in the first half an hour at Emirates Stadium, that with a week's preparation, they'd be able to come up with something that could stifle PSG and that could cause PSG problems. And at the beginning of the game, they absolutely did that. They had some really good opportunities that they really ought to have taken. It's kind of been the story of Arsenal's season in a lot of ways. We talk a lot about injuries, but the finishing's not been there as well. And that's been a big issue. But in a weird way, guys, I felt like the really positive start that Arsenal made, it kind of saw them grow in confidence almost too much. It saw them start to take risks and gambles that maybe were not necessary at that stage in the game, and they ended up conceding counter-attacking opportunities. I mean, we talk about the goal that PSG scored, the first one, Ruiz, fantastic finish, comes from a set piece, not cleared properly, but Kvaratskhelia hit the post. They had an almost 1v1 situation that developed prior to that. And those two opportunities that I referenced came about because Arsenal gave the ball away, trying to be too expansive at times and trying to be too clever in the way they progressed it. So, yeah, there's a feeling of disappointment. But I think for me, the biggest disappointment that I'm feeling today is not necessarily with the players. I think they gave absolutely everything. It's not even necessarily with the way that Mikel Arteta managed the game, because I thought he managed the game quite well. It's some of his post-match comments. I just want him to take accountability. I just want him to stop saying it's decided in the boxes and actually take accountability for the fact that we're not good enough in the two boxes at the moment. Now, why is that? And, people will reference the injuries and he will reference the injuries, but everybody always says Kai Havertz ain't clinical enough. Neither is Gabriel Jesus. So if you had either of those two in the team, would it have made the world a difference? That was still two of Arsenal's best front three playing. They were still their best midfield, and they're not taking those opportunities. And then when he says things after the game like, we were the better team, and then he says that PSG told me that, and then Luis Enrique kind of denies it like very shortly afterwards, you're starting to think like, what are you doing here? You don't need to throw your players under the bus. Nobody's demanding that you do that. But you can steer away from those kind of comments that are going to make you a laughingstock, that are going to get people on your back. And those that are anti-Mikel Arteta already and have fears and concerns about whether or not he can take Arsenal to the next level, when they hear things like that, that noise is only going to get louder. And I think he's got to manage those situations better.
No, I would agree with that. There's a lot of people getting Arteta's back post this match, and like you mentioned, in terms of the X's and O's and the way you set Arsenal up, I thought Arsenal were good. But you're right, Harry. Arsenal played that game like Liverpool played the 2019 semi-final second leg at Anfield when they were 3-0 down against Barcelona, where they had to score early to go. Arsenal were only 1-0 down in aggregate, and they were playing away at the Parc des Princes. And they were playing like they were 2 or 3-0 down. They had to get a goal early to kind of sustain momentum. And it was just maybe that immaturity. And Declan Rice spoke about it post-match, in terms of like, you just gain experience in these environments. And some of the pundits were talking about, if you don't go and, you can either learn two ways. The players that you've got can gain the experience, or you can go and buy players that have that experience. And I think that's where Arsenal will be in the summer. Do you go and get players that have been in these high leverage moments, or do you go and get young players who haven't been in those moments but can learn and hopefully use the experience to your players who have now been there, been in multiple title races, been to Champions League semi-final? And so I think Arsenal can hold their heads up high. You're going to get stick from rival fans, because that's just the nature of football discourse. But I think Arsenal, they counted themselves well in Paris. It's just they come up against a PSG team that, let's be honest, are better. Got two of the best fullbacks in the world, got one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Marquinhos has been there, he's seen it, he's done it, he's worn the t-shirt. Look at that midfield, Vitinha and Ruiz and João Neves. They just work perfectly together. And then the front three's been well documented. Even without Dembele starting, they've just got so much firepower and probably are more well-rounded than an Arsenal team who are missing some of the key players going into this game.
I do think it was a bit do or die, the attitude. And it was like, if they score in the first 10 minutes, you might go on and qualify. But because you didn't, you then used up up all your energy, you'd used up all your impetus. And as soon as PSG went down for the first time, they hit the post from an unbelievable shot. And I think when you're playing against a side who are that good attacking, you just need to take your chances. I think the one thing that I've been disappointed with is Bukayo Saka's been unbelievable this season. He's just an unbelievable footballer. Every time he got the ball yesterday, you knew that something would happen. But this is an Arsenal side who are trying to win the Champions League. They're trying to win the Premier League. There is no one backing him up. There's no other player there. Where for Manchester City, if Erling Haaland's not on form, over the last couple of seasons, you will have had a Phil Foden or a Kevin De Bruyne behind him. And I feel like Martin Odegaard was supposed to be that, and he just hasn't been. When the big occasions have rose this season, he's kind of let his side down a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's had a really bad season by his standards. There's no question about that. He started it off pretty well. Then he got that injury in one of the September international breaks. And from then on, he's never really recovered. And I can't quite put my finger on what exactly the issue is. We've heard a lot of talk about his kind of change in circumstances at home, became a father. I mean, I'm a dad. I know that it's a big life change. I know that it can take its toll on you physically and mentally, but there's so many other players in that boat that you can't use that as an excuse. To me, he doesn't quite look right physically.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, it's impacted on his confidence because he's trying things. It's not quite coming off. I didn't actually have too many issues with his performance in this game specifically. I think there was one moment in the first half where he really frustrated me, where he picked the ball up in the kind of inside right space and he drove towards the PSG defence and it all seemed to open up for him. And he's on the edge of the box, and rather than taking a shot, he took an extra touch and then played it into the feet of Martinelli. And that was a kind of moment where I thought the old Martin Odegaard, a confident Martin Odegaard, hits that. He tries to drag it back across the goal, goes for the bottom corner, tries to make something happen. He's fallen off this season, and it's really difficult to put your finger on why, but it's clear that he's playing without confidence. And him and Saka as a combination was such a big feature of Arsenal's play. That's not really working right now. You look at the other side and you've got Martinelli, who doesn't produce anywhere near enough in terms of outputs. Runs hard, works hard, defends well, but has not got that quality in the final third. And you compare that to PSG, Kvaratskhelia, Doué, Barcola, Dembele. These are top-level players, and that's why I took such a big issue with Arteta's comments about us being the better team. We're not the better team. And to say that we are the better team, for me, is to disregard one of the fundamentals of football, which is about having that quality in the final third to actually make your possession count. You can't go into every game, dominate the ball, not do a great deal with it, and then come away and say, well, we didn't deserve to lose, we were the better team. Because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I fully agree. And on that point in terms of final third, you can relate that to Martin Odegaard. Reality is, or perception is reality in football. And Odegaard, say he had a striker, an actual striker in front of him, who was making them runs and scoring goals, and he had 5 or 6 more assists, and all of a sudden it's viewed very differently. It's, Martin Odegaard's having a good season. His striker's Mikel Merino. And for a player that operates in those spaces, you need 4 players that are going to make the runs. And so I think next season, when we see Odegaard with an actual front man in front of him, we're going to see a different player. And I think that has affected his style of play. I've said it so many times. He's my favourite non-Chelsea player to watch. But this season he's fallen off a cliff, and we have to accept that. We have to acknowledge that. He doesn't look as physically imposing. He was never like a brute, but he looks very skinny. He's kind of just fallen off over the last 2 or 3 months, and I fully expect him to find his feet again. But you're right, Kim. With Arsenal, they need to find more threats. They need to find more X factors, because when Bukayo Saka has got Nuno Mendes on, I won't say on strings, but he's got them a yellow card early doors. If another Arsenal player can provide a threat or a different type of impetus, then you've got a different game. And that's what PSG had. And that's why PSG are a better team. And next season, Arsenal need to address that. But in terms of this game, the best team won, the best team edged it, and the best team are in the Champions League final.
Do you think, looking back on the game, there's any way that you would have liked Arteta to have set up differently, be it personnel? I know Lewis Skelly struggled, but he's a young lad. There's no point in criticising him. Is there any personnel you would change, or any style that you would try and implement a little bit better? Because you weren't far away from getting that goal, and you didn't play particularly badly in either legs.
In terms of the personnel, no. I think Mikel Arteta kind of had his hands tied behind his back with the fact that Thomas Partey was suspended for the first leg. And I think looking back on that was significant. It meant, look at the way that Arsenal managed PSG's midfield yesterday. I'm not saying dominated them, but managed them. They were able to do it because Arsenal had a balance of their own and they could play their game to a degree and to a point. In the first leg, they couldn't do that because what they had was a player sitting at the base in Declan Rice who didn't want to sit at the base. And you can't bring someone into the club who was a 6, coach them into being an 8 for the best part of 2 years, and then expect them to be able to flick a switch and lose everything that you've programmed into them over the course of that period and go back to what they were.
Yeah.
He wanted to go roaming. He wanted to go searching for the ball, and he got dragged out of position early on in the game. PSG went and scored from it. And afterwards, 25, 30 minutes in, Mikel Arteta realised that and obviously tweaked things, and Arsenal were far more competitive. But had Partey been in the team in the first place, that doesn't happen. Not saying Arsenal would have won with Thomas Partey in that side, but that was significant, and that meant he had limited options. Then you add into that you've got to bring Marino back into midfield because you're short of midfielders, because Jorginho's out as well. So that means you haven't got him at centre forward. Then you've got to put Trossard there, which doesn't really work. There was just a knock-on effect. But in terms of what the manager did, I would have done the exact same thing in terms of the selection. So I'm not going to criticise him for that.
I mean, I think you just look at the team and you just see that there are holes that need to be filled. I mean, we mentioned it in January, we mentioned it in summer. I don't think that the recruitment at Arsenal has been particularly good, and you've done very well this season to get to the semi-final of a Champions League. You're probably going to finish second in the league, but if the recruitment was a little bit better, that would push you to the next level. So obviously you are going to spend in summer. If you were to pinpoint a position, you're obviously looking at a number 9. Anywhere else where you think needs a bit more reinforcement?
Yeah, there's a few areas, and that's what makes me slightly concerned about the summer, because there's a lot of lifting to be done. And given how much work Arsenal have done in the transfer market over the last 5 years, I don't think they should be in this position now. But they're in this position because for the last year and a half, they haven't really done what they needed to do. Partey looks like he's probably going to leave. Jorginho is definitely going to leave. So you need midfield regeneration because you're losing those two. Lots of talk about Martin Zubimendi coming in, but obviously that's not a done deal as far as we're aware. You're probably going to lose a couple of the squad players. You're definitely losing Kieran Tierney. Zinchenko is probably one that's going to go as well. And so you need to reinforce there. We're going to let Neto go back to Bournemouth, our second choice goalkeeper, who's barely featured. So we need to bring in another goalkeeper. And we need that 9. And I would argue we need another winger. So all of a sudden you're looking at a 4 or 5 player summer. And if you want to maintain the high standards, you've got to go and spend big on these players because they've got to be high level players. And that's why I worry now about where we're at and about the summer, because it feels like sometimes if you let something slip away, it's very hard to recover it. And doing a bit of business in January or a bit more business last summer would have put us in a position where we're not scrambling around come this summer, hoping to reinvent things.
Yeah, I would agree. Look at Man City. They did some business in January. They had money to spend. I think Arsenal could have done something. Could have done something in January. And I know that a lot of the options that they will link with seem like short-term options. The Ollie Watkins one that really makes sense to me. But like I mentioned, in this game, you see PSG who did do business and brought in Kvaratskhelia is probably a reason why they're going to win the Champions League. I'm not saying that bringing in a striker or a front man in January would have guaranteed Arsenal winning trophies, but it would have helped to alleviate some of the pressure that you're going to pile on yourself in the summer, where there's going to be so much transition, like Harry pointed out, 4 players in, 8 players out. I don't know how they get it done, but it needs to get it done.
Lots of work to be done in the summer for Arsenal. Let us know in the comments down below who you want to see at the Emirates Stadium next year.